Magic loop is a way to knit in a small circumference without having to use double point needles. It is a great technique for socks, tops of hats, sleeves, gloved fingers and thumbs, etc. Magic loop involves just one long circular needle with half the stitches on one needle and half the stitches on the other. You need a minimum of a 32-inch length from needle tip to needle tip. Here I have cast on 16 stitches all at once. To get the stitches onto the different ends, I'm going to count over, I'm going to move them all to the cable, and then I'm going to count over 8 stitches and pull the cable out in between. So now I have 8 and 8 and slide them all onto the needle tips. Be real careful when you do this so that you don't twist this end. So now I need to flip them around this way. So your working yarn, the one that's attached to your ball, should always be attached to the needle that's in the back. This is the front needle, this is the back needle. So always, always, always when you set up for each row, you're going to make sure that the yarn is coming from the needle that's in the back. To start knitting, you're going to hold on to these stitches, but slide them all onto the cable and pull out the back needle, and then flip it around to start knitting here. One of the pitfalls is you have to make sure that this working yarn is over the top of your needle. If it's underneath and you start to knit, you will make a yarn over, add a stitch, and eventually add a hole, which you don't want. So when we pull that needle out, I always flip this up over the back. So now I'm going to go into this stitch, grab my yarn. That first stitch I pull fairly tightly so that I don't have a big long string between the two. And now I'm just going to knit across the 8 stitches on this front needle. When you get to the end of that needle, now the needle that's in your left hand is empty. Drop it. Turn your work clockwise. You're going to slide these stitches onto the needle in the front. Your yarn's coming from the back. These are the stitches we just worked. And now I'm going to pull this out again underneath and knit across. Remember that in order to work a full round, you have to work all the stitches on both needles. So to help me remember that, drop, turn, then I push and a pull. I add a locking stitch marker after my first row. I just attach it to the first couple of stitches on my front needle because that tells me that this is the beginning of my round. So once again, I'm going to move the yarn to the back, pull my cable out. Be sure you don't pull it all the way because if you do, all of your stitches will end up on one needle and you'll have to move them all back onto the cable and separate them out again. Not that it isn't doable, but it's just annoying. So once again, I'm going to knit across. Oftentimes when you start a project like this, especially if it's like for tops of socks or things like that, you're actually doing ribbing. But get used to doing it in just knitting first. All right, left needle's empty, drop, turn your work clockwise, push those front stitches onto your needle. Gently pull the back needle out, but here's the loop part. That's why they call this magic loop, because we have 2 loops. And needle, yarn up and over, start to knit again. Go ahead and practice this until you feel comfortable moving from needle to needle. Then try it with some ribbing. Have fun. Thanks.